Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. The brain is one of the most complex and amazing organs in the human body. It produces our every thought, action, emotion, and experience of the world around us, and is our most complex organ. Whatever you're thinking right now, whether it be that you're hungry or that this video sucks so far, it's all attributed to the 3.1-pound jelly-like mass that is your brain. If Emily and I made a video explaining everything there is to know about this topic, we would never leave room 163.
Oh, hell no!
So our presentation today will be focusing specifically on
The left, right hemispheres.
First, an overall introduction of the brain's basic structure and function, since the two are so closely intertwined in the field of biology. Right, Miss Amelo? In the primary chunk of our video, concerning the left and right hemispheres of the brain in all their glory and what gives them their distinct qualities, what they are responsible for, and how they differ.
how the two hemispheres work together and are connected despite their differences to keep us alive. What happens when the brain is damaged, and specifically the consequences that follow injury of the left or right hemispheres. Then a quick conclusion to solidify and wrap up what we learned today.
The brain is a major center that receives, integrates, stores, and retrieves information. Its interneuron network created responses that provide the foundation for our voluntary movements, consciousness, behavior, emotions, learning, reasoning, language,
like the spinal cord,
and memory.
The brain structure contains gray matter and white matter and is surrounded by meninges, which are 3 layers of connected tissue that protect the brain and the spinal cord and cerebrospinal fluid.
The hindbrain of vertebrates develop into the medulla oblongata, common name is the medulla, and the cerebellum. The medulla is a region that connects the spinal cord to the cerebellum and deals with involuntary behavior. Examples are breathing and digestion.
The cerebellum is the hindbrain region that is involved with muscle movement and balance. Its major role is motor responses and fine motor control. In higher mammals like us humans, a mass of fibers connects the cerebellum to higher centers in the brain. Its most noticeable feature is known as the pons. The pons is the region that transfers nerve signals between the cerebellum and the medulla. The medulla, the pons, and the midbrain all form a star-like structure which is known as the brainstem. It connects the forebrain to the spinal cord. The forebrain makes up most of the human's brain mass and forms the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the brain region that is involved in motor activities and sensory information. It folds to cover the regions of the brain that are developed by the midbrain and hindbrain.
The surface layer of the cerebrum, also known as the cerebral cortex, is a thin layer of gray matter in which unmyelinated neurons are found.
It carries out all the higher complex brain functions.
The cerebrum is divided into the right and left cerebral hemispheres. It is grouped by fissures and folds that increase the surface area of the cerebral cortex and divides the brain into the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes.
The first thing you may realize about these two sides is that they look really similar, if not identical. And for the most part, that's absolutely correct. But even though the two sides of the brain look almost physically the exact same as each other, the two sides are responsible for different things. The two cerebral hemispheres can function separately. Each has its own communication lines internally and with the rest of the CNS and the body. The left hemisphere responds primarily to sensory signals from and controls movements in the right side of the body. The right hemisphere has the same relationship with the left side of the body. The opposite connection and control reflect the fact that the nerves carrying afferent and efferent signals cross from left to right within the spinal cord or brainstem. Thick axon bundles, which form a structure called the corpus callosum, connect the two cerebral left and right hemispheres and coordinate their functions.
The cerebellum has a folded structure that increases its size. It is connected to the pons, but is separate in structure and function from the brainstem. The cerebellum receives sensory input that originates from receptors in the muscles and joints. The sensory input sends information about how the body trunk and limbs are positioned in.
The thalamus does some really cool things. It forms a major switchboard that receives sensory information and then relays it to the appropriate regions of the cerebral cortex. It plays a role in alerting the cerebral cortex to full wakefulness or inducing drowsiness or sleep.
Since the brain is in an isolated area compared to the rest of the body, so many substances that enter the body cannot reach the brain. This is because of the endothelial cells that form capillaries in the brain, and they have tight junctions between them. The tight junctions set up a blood-brain barrier that prevents most substances dissolved in the blood from entering the cerebrospinal fluid. This gives protection for the brain and the spinal cord from infection by viruses, bacteria, and toxic substances that may circulate in the blood. While the barrier normally prevents cells such as white blood cells from entering the brain, the immune response activates T cells that are able to cross the barrier. The barrier also allows a more stable composition of the cerebrospinal fluid, protecting it from wide fluctuations that occur in blood in response to meals and other factors. A few molecules and ions such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, and aesthetics can move directly across the lipid bilayer of the cell membranes by diffusion. A few other substances are moved across the plasma membrane by highly selective transport proteins. Glucose is the most significant as it is the source of metabolic energy for the cells in the brain.
There have been multiple myths circulating that assume that the dominance of one side of the brain completely influences you and your personality to be a certain type of person. This is what BuzzFeed quizzes want you to think. However, this isn't too far off. Anatomically speaking, the hemispheres are inclined to control their own certain aspects and abilities, as the neurotransmitters located on either side have their own specific duties and functions. The left hemisphere of the brain is associated with logic, reasoning, analyzing information, computation skills, number skills, grammar, listening, writing, reading, speaking, time awareness, and sequential thinking. It is often thought of as the less imaginative, more by the book, and smart, strict part of the brain.
And the reason we need to make it is because we need P.
While the right hemisphere of the brain is associated with emotion, abstract meaning, spatial relationships, visual information, intuition, imagination, and music art awareness. The right side of the brain is said to process info holistically and use intuition to solve problems. Also, to be creative and see the end result with clarity. But don't get it twisted. Even though these two hemispheres are responsible for and coordinate different abilities within the human body, they must still work together to maintain life as we know it, via a structure called the corpus callosum that connects the two. Now, as we can all assume, any injury to the brain will obviously be extremely detrimental to the individual and can impact lives greatly. And depending on which hemisphere of the brain the injury occurs on, different detriments will arise. Injuries on the left side of the brain can cause difficulty understanding spoken and written language. Strokes can cause changes in speech. There's verbal memory issues, impaired logic, and sequencing difficulties. And inversely, injuries on the right side of the brain can cause impairments in attention, memory issues, decreased awareness of deficits, and loss of the big picture thinking that they once had. Also, an altered creative or musical perception. Oh, hello again. What has your brain absorbed during our video? Well, today we covered the basic structure and function of the human brain, followed by the left and right hemispheres in more detail, what they govern, their abilities, and how they differ, but also how they're connected via the structure of the corpus callosum to coordinate our everyday activities. And finally, we went over detriments that arise from traumatic brain injuries. I shouldn't be smiling that hard while talking about brain injuries.
Thanks for watching. We love you guys. Love you guys.
You're smart.
The cerebrum is divided into the right. This is my left, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sure.